Hey there, welcome to the presentation that we put together to talk about basic training for your breeding stock dogs. We're looking at the why, the how, and some helpful tips for you. So first of all, why is training important? You want a well-rounded dog, and that's the ideal, household companion. You also want to provide the dog with mental stimulation. It's just as important as their physical health and well-being. You're going to help create a stronger bond with that dog, make it more part of your family, which is in terms also going to help reduce the stress of that dog and you. If your dog isn't listening or behaving properly, it can be a very stressful time, with your dog, and trying to figure out communication is a huge block sometimes, and training is a tool to help with that. And then, even more importantly, I think, is the safety aspect of it. We're going to give you some tools on, basically how to better go forward with your dog.
So some of the basics of dog training, first is going to be consistency. So things like making sure the entire family is using the same cue. The biggest one that we often find people get mixed up is down and off. So down being lay down and off being get off of whatever you are on. So really making sure that the entire family understands each cue, and we'll have a list of them here shortly, thoroughly, and understands when to use the specific cues so that the dog doesn't get confused during the learning process and later on when you're asking for a behavior to be performed. Also, consistency in rewarding the same correct behavior. So making sure that anyone working with the dog and providing a reinforcement or a reward to the dog is rewarding the same behavior. So an example might be sitting down, with their bottom all the way on the ground versus maybe hovering a little bit. You want to make sure that everyone understands exactly what the behavior should look like, and that the reward is given for that behavior instead of variations of that behavior, because that's only more confusing to the dog on what exactly you want them to do. Consistency also meaning to avoid multiple cues. So saying sit once and looking for the dog to perform that behavior instead of saying sit, 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 sit. And again, anyone that's working with this dog should understand the appropriate way to cue a dog. Patience is very important in dog training, as with most avenues in life. Pay attention to what the dog is telling you. So looking for 90% success at the current level before increasing the difficulty for that dog. If the dog is not performing something for you, it's not because they're stubborn. Dogs are not innately stubborn. When we see a dog that is acting in a way that we might consider stubborn, it's actually typically because they do not fully understand what you're asking for in the current context or the environment that they're in. Or they have not been sufficiently reinforced for the correct behavior. So they have not had enough reps of the correct behavior or repetitions of the correct behavior to understand that that is the behavior that's expected after a certain cue is given. And we're using different words here that I can talk about briefly. Cue is going to be what some may consider a command or a word to tell the dog what behavior you're asking. So sit, down, stay, those are going to be cues. And then behavior is that action that you're expecting after the cue. So if you're asking them to sit, define that behavior. That behavior to you and your family means that dog's bottom is sitting on the ground and they're sitting still. So again, those are probably two good terminology words to think about as we go forward in this PowerPoint. Be realistic about your skill level and your dog's skill level. One of the worst things we can do is try to push this faster, try to push any training faster than the dog is ready for. So be realistic with yourself, be honest with yourself and with your dog's skill level to say, hey, we're not quite there yet, no problem, we're working on it. We can stay at this level a little bit longer before we move on. You really want to make sure you're setting your dog up for success and continued success to make the learning process as quick as possible and to make it as stress-free and successful as possible. So one of the big things about dog training is going to be the 3Ds. These are the kind of words that bring difficulty into an exercise for a dog. So if you're thinking of dog training, always be thinking about these 3Ds that make things difficult. So duration, so how long a dog is supposed to perform a behavior, is going to be one difficulty. Say you want the dog to sit still for 3 seconds versus 3 minutes. Increasing that duration is going to increase the difficulty of that behavior, that cue. Distance, so how far away a dog is from either from a distraction or from you. Sometimes when you're asking them to perform a behavior, can change the difficulty and increase the difficulty. When you're close to them, asking them to do something, that's often easier. Versus if the dog is across the yard and you're asking them to do something, that distance is much higher, and that increases the difficulty for them to perform that behavior. And then distraction, having distractions around you as you're asking a dog to perform or cueing a dog to perform a behavior. Increased distractions is going to increase difficulty. So at home in your living room, when there's no extra food around, there's no neighbor dogs, there's no squirrels, there's no traffic going by, you and just your dog, there's no other people in the house, that's a very low distraction point. Than a higher distraction, which might be downtown New York City or anything in between there, that's going to increase difficulty for your dog with more distractions. So it's very important when you're thinking about these 3Ds of dog training. If you increase one, or if you're working on one of them, you need to decrease the other two. So if you're working on increasing your distance, going from maybe 1 foot away from the dog to 10 feet away from the dog, you need to make sure that the duration is very low and the distraction is very low. So you're only asking a dog to work hard on one of those Ds at a time. And especially if you're introducing a new behavior or new cue, it's going to be very important to make sure that we're setting the dog up for success, and we want the dog to be right as many times as possible, because they're going to pick up on that behavior that much faster. So, if you're teaching a dog to sit, for 5 minutes, you want to make sure there's no other distractions around, and distractions can be anything, whatever's distracting your dog. Remember to listen to your dog and what they're telling you is a distraction. And also we want to make sure that you're nice and close to the dog and not, 10 feet away asking them to sit for 3 minutes right off the bat. So just keeping in that mind, and understanding that if the dog is not performing the behavior as you're expecting it, one or more of those Ds is too high or is too much for the dog at that point. So if the dog isn't doing a behavior, ask yourself, okay, why isn't the dog not doing this? What's preventing the dog from doing this? And then we have a great video here to kind of go into depth about that.
Here's Dakota working with Martini, working on duration. She puts him in a sit, asks him to stay just a sec, and then lures him out of the sit with a release and the reward of a treat. She repeats this, asking him to wait. She counts off a little bit of time and releases him. Gives him a treat, tells him he's a good boy. Now she moves on to distance. Asks him to sit, stay, takes a step or two away, walks back to him, and releases him. The final hurdle of today will be working through distraction. She is in a class of dogs. The distraction isn't real high for Martini. He's not too bothered by dogs. Notice she returns to him frequently, rewarding him for his sit stay. She's not releasing him. She's just rewarding him and telling him he's doing the right thing. She's keeping the reward frequency high so that he knows that he's accomplishing duration and distance during distraction. Here she uses a piece of food to keep him in place as she goes around behind him, and then releases him.
So that was a great video. It just kind of showed a couple of examples of the 3Ds of difficulty for dog training. So distance, duration, and distraction, showed it in action. And I guess one of the goals too is as your dog starts to become very good at building distance or building duration or building distraction, then you can start working on 2 at a time. But again, you want to consider going back to that 90% successful every time you ask the dog to do it. So if they're still, maybe only being successful half of the time, you want to make sure to stay at that level and continue to work on that and continue to build the 1D before moving on to more difficult aspects. So to begin, you want to make sure that you have the following things ready to go before starting to work with your dog. And really, it should be any time that you're taking your dog anywhere that there could be a training opportunity. So it's not necessarily just stepping outside into your yard and saying, okay, we're going to train this today. You really should be ready for training at a moment's notice. If you're out on a walk with your dog, there may a training opportunity may come up that you weren't anticipating, and you need to be prepared on how to handle that. And you always want to be vigilant, watching for the next training opportunity. So kind of like when you get ready to leave for the day, you take your lunchbox, you take, your keys, your wallet, those types of things. Anytime you're going to take your leash out for your dog, you want to make sure you always have your leash. You want to make sure you always have a collar for the dog, dependent on which collar your dog is accustomed to. It may be just a plain buckle collar, it may be a martingale collar, and it may be a walk and train. But that's all going to be based on what your dog is already accustomed to. And each of those have their own training component to start with. So I recommend starting with whatever collar your dog already utilizes. In addition to the leash, the collar, and the dog, you want to make sure that you have kibble ready to go at all times. So a trail mix with maybe just some regular kibble, their regular food kibble, and then mix in some high value treats in there. So maybe a little bit of a more meaty and moist treat, something that's, again, low calorie, but something that's a little different than their kibble. Not only will it be mixed in with their kibble and make their kibble seem a little bit better, but it's also going to be that high value treat that you can reach for in a situation where maybe it was a very difficult situation for your dog to come through, but they did it, and they did it spectacularly, and you really want to be able to give them a little bit extra. And also necessary when a dog is working through a difficult problem and maybe having some trouble. If you have a high value treat, you can utilize that to kind of get them to move forward through that exercise a little bit easier when they've got a really exciting reward to look forward to. The last thing is, if you're going to be working around the house, you want to start in a quiet, familiar space with few distractions. Again, we talked about decreasing those distractions for the dog to be able to make them as successful as possible. As you progress in the dog's skills, you can move to unfamiliar spaces and increasing distractions as long as the dog is understanding the behavior and is reliably performing it on cue. So when you leave the house, always have leash, collar, dog, kibble, poop bags, and you're ready to train at a moment's notice. We've also got a great video here about clean handling and treat delivery on how to appropriately treat a dog.
And so what you'll see here is something that we would recommend. We want you to be able to keep your dog in the proper position. If they're in a sit, you don't want them to have to get up to get a treat from you. Likewise, if you're walking them down the street and you want them in a heel position, if you're accustomed to always giving their treat in front of you, that's where they're going to be spending their time. So this video was produced by 2 of our GDMIs. Those are guide dog mobility instructors. And they did these videos primarily, and we're going to go through a lot of them today. So keep in mind who they were made for. They produced these videos for the dogs that had come in for training, but due to COVID-19 had to go out on rehomes. And in the rehomes, they were people that were maybe not as savvy with dog handling and everything. So this is very basic beginning, just clean handling when you're talking about treats.
Today we're going to go over what we call clean handling, basically. That means how you're going to give a treat to your dog in the appropriate position. Okay? So the things you're going to need are some treats. You can use the dog's kibble, or you can use, if you have some Charlie Bears or some other low-calorie treats, you can use that for rewarding the dogs. And you need a treat pouch, which Eric has here on his back right hip. It's out of the line of the view of the dog, so they can't see it and stare at it. Or if you don't have a treat pouch, you can use your pocket, or if you have a fanny pack, anything that you can just keep a little food in. Okay? So Eric's going to go ahead and explain clean handling and how you can use it to give your dogs food reward.
All right. Good boy. Okay. So we are going to be going over how to deliver food to our dog. When we do this, we're going to be using our right hand only, just for consistency's sake. This is the same way that the dogs have been rewarded as puppies, the same way they were rewarded all through their training, and this is how the clients will be taught how to reward their dogs with food. So for the sake of consistency, we want to just keep everyone on the same page and delivering food in the same sort of way and keeping all the mechanics the same. Okay? So again, we'll start with the right hand, and we're going to only take one piece of food at a time. We don't want to be trying to deliver multiple pieces of kibble and having food drop all over the floor. That's going to create more problems than we need. Okay? So if you want to get in a little closer here, I'll show you. There are a couple different ways that you can secure a treat in your hand here. This is the method I prefer, but I'll show you a couple different ones here. I will take the treat and simply pinch it against the flat of my flattened hand with my thumb. And this just ensures that the treat is secured so that when I go to move it from my treat pouch to the dog's mouth, it doesn't fall on the ground or get loose from me. Okay? Another way to hold the treat is to simply cup it in your hand. And this creates almost like a cup so that the treat can't go anywhere, and to come straight up into the dog's mouth from there. Okay? So I'm going to demonstrate both of these using my hand to kind of simulate a dog's mouth before we actually practice on Deacon here in real time. Okay? So the first switch, again, pinch method, pinching that treat to the flat of the hand here. We're going to come to the dog's mouth, make contact with the dog's mouth, and then as soon as we make contact with the dog's mouth, we can slide our thumb out and then use the flat of the hand to push the treat into the dog's mouth. Don't be worried about pushing the dog's head back. It's almost even preferred to give it a little push back to ensure that that treat gets all the way into the dog's mouth, because if you get hesitant and you pull away a little too quick, you could have food dropping on the floor, and then you have a dog that's madly scrambling to get to the food that's falling all over the floor. Okay? So again, come in, contact, remove the thumb, push that food in the dog's mouth, remove your hand away. Okay? The second method, the cup. We get that treat there in the cup made by our hand. Dog's mouth. We're going to come from underneath the dog's mouth and go upward. Now for those of us who are kind of tall, this method's a little more difficult because you have to get below the dog's mouth and come up with the treat in order for it to be successful, because trying to do this from the side or even above can make things a little more difficult. So straight up into the dog's mouth, remove. Okay.
Eric, what side do you want the dog to be on when you're doing this?
Right where he's at right now. So I always want the dog on my left side, and this is to ensure I know where he's at. This is the position that he's been heavily reinforced with all his life as a puppy, through training, and even when he goes, into becoming a working dog, he's always going to be on the left side. So we're always going to want to make sure that that food gets all the way over to the left side. So whether you're doing the pinch method or you're doing the cup, you're going to come from the right side here, and you're going to go all the way over to the left where the dog is. In this case, he's down here, but...
We got a little bit of drool going on here.
Yeah, it's all right. It happens. Okay? So I think we're ready to start a couple practices with Deacon here.
Yep.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Everybody, stand. Good. Okay. Good boy, Deacon. Reach in the pouch. Pinched in the hand. Slide the hand away. I'll try to do it a little slower, but Deacon's going to be super excited to get to that food, so we'll see how it goes. All right, pinched in the hand, right to Deacon's mouth, slide the thumb away, push, slide my hand away. Okay? Very nice. Okay, and then the other method is the cup. We make the cup with our hand, come from below, push up. Good boy. Good job. Very nice. And that covers the basics of clean handling.
So there you saw a couple of great examples on how to deliver treats cleanly and ensure that the dog is getting appropriate, not nibbling at your fingers or causing other problematic behaviors. So basic training exercises for your breeding stock dog that we're going to discuss today. There's of course tons and tons of cues that we could talk about, but we're also going to limit it to some of the more frequently asked questions or things that are commonly asked from our hosts to work on with their dogs. So obedience and increasing duration of stay. We're going to talk about mat training, loose leash walking, working around distractions, relaxation protocol. And we're also going to talk about two problem behaviors, which are very similar, but a couple of different components, counter surfing and eating or picking up inappropriate items.
Great. So for our obedience behaviors, these are behavioral cues. And as Sam described earlier, the cues are the words that you will say to the dog that indicates to the dog which behavior you want them to perform. So in this instance, this list that's available here, we provided to all of our host homes when they picked up your breeding stock dogs. And, we'll go over a few of these, but the basics are the dogs know how to sit down, come, stay, park, which is relieving themselves on leash, staying off people and off counters. The most important thing, that Sam talked about is the description of what those behaviors mean. So everything is different. Every person has a different perception of what a sit looks like or a down looks like. So it's very important when you're working with your dog to make sure that you've previously discussed all of this with your family if everyone's going to be working with that dog. So, puppy development has a lot of videos that we can share with you at a later time. I know that we've gone over the cues to give the dogs, not only verbally, but you can also give some hand signals for sit and down. In the next video that we'll be playing, we actually you'll see some of the cues where they start to also build in duration. So the following video that I will share includes, they also want the dogs to not only just stay in position, but come when called. So this video talks about how you add in the duration, one of those Ds that Sam talked about. Distance will come when you have more space, but the duration is what they're working on building in this video.
So the first of which is if you have the dogs that are responding in a timely manner to your sit, down, stay commands, you can start to build duration with the dogs. So that just means waiting a certain set period of time before you reward the dog for doing the behavior you asked of it, okay? So in this case, I'm going to get Deacon to sit, and then I'm going to wait to reward him, okay? Deacon, yeah, come on, Bubba. Deacon, sit. Good boy. 1, 2, 3. Good boy, very nice. Now, if Deacon went to go to break that at say 1 or 2, then I would probably stop, reset him, get him back into the sit, and maybe only wait 2 seconds next time to make the difficulty a little easier for him. Okay?
He's got some slingers going on.
Yeah, he does. He has quite a bit of drill. Okay? So another problem we can run into when we are working with the dogs, in obedience especially, is called anticipation. So as you can see, just
We
on
did
cue,
not train him to do that.
Deacon is anticipating that from the sit, he's going to go into the down because a lot of obedience routines follow the same routine of sit, down, stay, sit, down, stay, sit, down, stay. Well, after a while, the dogs start to figure out, why am I going to stay here in a sit when I know that the down is the next thing to come? So now that Deacon's laid in the down, I'm not going to reward him, even though down is a good behavior, but it's not what we're asking for him in this moment. So I want Deacon back in a sit, so I can just tell Deacon, sit. Sit. Good boy. Very nice. Good job. Okay, and then instead of going to the down, I can go from a sit into a heel and just tell him, Deacon, heel. Good boy. Very nice. Deacon, heel. Good job. Deacon, heel. Very nice. Deacon, heel. Good boy. Sit. 1, 2, 3. Good boy. Very nice. So the 3-second rule again is not a concrete, firm thing. It's just you can start at whatever increment the dog is ready for. So if the dog can only hold the sit for maybe 2 seconds, then you just do it for 2 seconds and you build it up from there.
Do you always have to go do a sit first?
You do not always have to go to a sit. So I could even have Deacon heel. Good job, Deacon heel. Very nice. Deacon heel. Okay, Deacon. Down. Good boy. 1, 2, 3, 4. Very nice. Okay. And another fun thing you can do and you can incorporate into the obedience routine, which is very similar to the hide and seek video that we put out recently, is a little bit of recall with the dog on leash. Okay.
Yeah. One question, Eric. Since his butt is kind of out to the left side, how can you fix that and reposition that?
Okay. Deacon. I can have him. Deacon. Yep. Good boy. Yep. Very nice. Deacon, sit. Down. Very nice, good boy. So I can get him repositioned like that so that we are nice and lined up straight there. Also watching where my hand signals are. So if I'm doing them out here and kind of lowering him, his butt might turn away from the handler here. He's kind of got himself in a lazy down over here. Okay? All right, Deacon. Yep. Come on. Yep. Very nice. Okay. Like I said, we can practice that recall command here with Deacon. So what I'm going to do is just I'm going to leave him in a standing position here, and I'm going to tell him stay, stay, stay. Okay, Deacon, come. Good boy, very, very nice. Good job. Good job. So it's similar to the hide and seek game that we played in the earlier video. It's just that we want to make sure the dog comes to us. We get a hold of that collar lightly. You don't have to yank and grab it because they're going to be less likely to want to come and visit you. But just to get a hold of that collar so you know that the dog is right there, and then you reward the dog right at you. Just like that.
So, as you noticed, Eric described a little bit of what Sam had already touched on. The dog in this video, Deacon, was already performing these behaviors, over 90% of the time, and on first cue. So the dog, when he asked him to sit, would sit, which is then at the point when you can start to add in duration or distance and distractions. But keep in mind, if that dog was only performing a sit or a down, 50% of the time, you have more work to do. What you can do then is increase the reinforcements that go into establishing that behavior better. Basically, it's generally has to do with the fact that that dog doesn't have a big enough history or memory bank to know that that's the behavior you want out of the dog. Again, most of the dogs that are in our breeding colony have come through our puppy raising program. So these behaviors that we're talking about are behaviors that these dogs innately actually should know. The difference is now you have to understand their language and they have to understand yours. And all of that comes with consistency, describing exactly the behavior that you want among all of the people that are going to be training the dog, etc. So now we're going to talk a little bit about mat training, which is also called station training. And it's something that we start off very early with our future leader dogs. So again, most of your breeding stock dogs are going to have some of this behavior built up. But even if you don't have a dog that's been through our program, you can start station training at any time. The idea behind station training is teaching a dog that you have chosen a place where you want them to spend their time when you have asked for them to do that. It's you'll hear in this video, it's helpful to keep them out of the kitchen while you're washing dishes and going back and forth from side to side of the kitchen, or you're going up and down the stairs doing laundry. You don't need the dog to follow you back and forth. Again, the foundation of mat training builds off of the exact same foundation of all of the other behavioral cues. You have to make sure that you're building duration slowly, you're building your distance slowly, and you're adding distractions to this slowly. So you're not going right from here's your mat, you should be staying on it, and then going and washing dishes for 10 minutes and coming back. So to start off with mat training, you're going to want to choose what you're going to call their mat or their station. So if you have a yoga mat, sometimes those work really nice. You can fold them in half or use the whole length of it. Even a towel, bathroom rugs are nice. Maybe you have a dog bed that's easy enough to move around with you, or even a raised dog bed. So just choose it and be consistent with that's the dog's place. That is where you will do their mat training. You're going to want, and Kate will go over this a little bit in the video, you're going to want the dog just kind of up and about walking around the house when you start, to make sure that you're indicating now is the time for mat behavior and this is what you're doing. So she'll walk you through a little bit of how to get the dog to the mat because they don't know the importance of that mat. You have to teach the importance of that mat. And that takes time and repetition. When you first start off with this training, start for 2 to 4 minute sessions. This isn't a marathon right to start. It's going to be important that you build this up over time because that will create a stronger foundation for you going forward as you then start increasing your distance, increasing the duration, and then increasing distractions as well. So the goal of mat training is that the dog stays on their mat in a comfortable position until you release them with okay. That's typically what we use for our future leader dogs. So you could also use that for your breeding stock dogs. Think about how helpful this behavior could be in all sorts of circumstances. People coming over, eating, while you're eating at the dining room table. If you're working from home or the kids, maybe your kids have friends over and you want that dog to be more under control and in a safe place. So that's that's kind of the goal here.
Okay. So we actually have a new friend with us today. Uma came to join us today. She's a dog that's in training as well, that's living in the kennel right now. So we have multiplied our dog numbers right now.
Deacon's sleeping. He's in his trailer right now, so he's offset.
He was a little too tired from yesterday's.
Right.
So today we thought we would work on showing you guys how to teach a simple mat behavior. Okay, Uma's demonstrating it very well right now. Yeah, you would be a good girl, huh? So we're going to teach you how to motivate your dog to lay in a calm, stationary position on a mat that you've set up. So this might help you know, a lot of times when we have the dogs in the house, you're in the kitchen, you're in the office, things like that. So if the dog stays in one spot, it can be much more helpful when you're dealing with hot pans, or, you know, you've got a small space like our humble abode here, and you're trying to get stuff done without having a dog under your feet. So we're going to show you that with Uma now.
All right. Kate's going to run through the steps of how to introduce this to the dog. So we'll start from the dog in a standing position, just kind of floating about the house, just like your dog might be doing right now. And Kate's going to demonstrate how to show the dog where she wants it to be positioned. So at this point, we're just simply showing the dog. We don't expect the dog to know where this position is, where the mat is, where the bed is. You know, they're still getting used to the new home environment. So we're going to be doing our best to just kind of show them in the beginning steps here.
So we're going to do use what we call a food lure. A lure is basically just something motivating that you place in front of the dog's nose that they're interested in, that you can use to direct them to do the behavior you want to do, basically. You're showing the dog what you want. So I've got a treat, a Charlie bear in my hand here, like Eric showed us yesterday. I place it right in front of Uma's nose. I'm just going to hold her collar lightly to help show her where I want her to go. And I'm going to just bring her over to the mat here. I'm going to get her up onto the mat, and then I'm just going to lure her, or lower the lure to the floor, and then give it to her so she's in a down position. Very good. Good girl. If she doesn't lay down automatically, or she or he, then you can use the treat. You can use what we showed you yesterday, use that hand signal to also get them to lay down as well, and then a little pressure on the collar, pulling towards the floor to encourage that down behavior as well. Okay, so now we have her in the spot that we want her in. So forgot to mention that it doesn't have to be a dog bed or a mat per se. It can be a towel, it can be a blanket, any object that the dog can lay on top of that gives them a place to be. Okay, she's doing a really good job of maintaining that position while I'm walking around, so I'm going to continue to treat her for that. So you want to start with short time frames, okay? Short time intervals. So you don't want to have too high of expectations in the beginning. So just 3, 4, or 5 minutes the first session, and then you can slowly increase it from there. Good. So she's not necessarily in the left position when I'm treating her right now, but I'm still shoving that food back into her face so she doesn't take the treat too excitedly. So you can kind of pretend you're cooking, making dinner.
And how often should I be giving the dog treats while I'm doing this?
In the beginning, it can be pretty frequently. I would say every 10, 20, 30 seconds. It doesn't have to be the same exact interval every time. In fact, you don't want it to be the same interval. But as you see them make progress, you can slowly increase those times. It depends on the dog, too, and how distracting the situation is. You want to start in a quiet spot first. Go ahead, wash your hands, 20 seconds. Happy birthday to you.
You're ridiculous. Uma's staring at the camera right now.
You can also use this if you're sitting in the office. You want them to be in a relaxed position. Put a bed near your office, and then every once in a while, just give them a treat for doing the right thing and maintaining that calm behavior. Oh, look, there's Deacon.
So one of the more common things that you're probably gathering right now from our presentation is that all of the time that you're interacting with the dog, you're training your dog. And, a lot of us carry around our treat pouches, and it looks real convenient, but you can just as easily put some treats in your pocket and reinforce the dog throughout the day for doing behaviors that you like them to do. Even if you're not doing something like actual mat training, the dog's laying down while you're busy doing something. take that time, obviously if the dog's sleeping, let the dog sleep. But, if the dog's being real good, chewing a bone or whatever, go let them know. Just as important as a treat is, so is praise and saying, oh, what a good dog. You're being so great. Every time we're in front of our animals, we're training them. So, that's kind of the whole basis of our presentation today.
So next we'll talk about loose leash walking. So for loose leash walking, I know this is something that is very important for our breeding stock dogs because we also emphasize how much they need to get out for exercise and making sure they're staying nice and fit to be ready for breeding, and also for whelping for the moms. So to start, be prepared with treats. So we talked about that trail mix already, having some just kibble, some Charlie Bears, and then some high value treats in there. Have them out of sight in a pocket or in a treat pouch or a fanny pack, just so the dog is a little less drawn to just the treat pouch itself, and they understand that you could reward them at any time, not just because you're wearing a treat pouch or holding kibbles. You don't want to have treats in your hand the whole time. You need to have them tucked away, or else you can teach a dog like, oh, I only need to perform this behavior when I have treats, when you have treats in your hand, not when you ask me any other time. And that's not what we want to set the dog up for. Using only the martingale or a walk and train, as we discussed and as provided by Leader Dog, again, whatever your dog is already most comfortable with. Start with lower distraction environments. So in your driveway or in parking lots, places that aren't going to have squirrels, ducks, other dogs, people, you have to determine what's distracting to your dog. So maybe you're starting just in the front yard or on your driveway. Maybe you're starting in your basement. It just depends on what works for your dog. Then we've got some videos here for the progression to show quickly what the frequency of reinforcement should look like while walking. Also what loose leash walking looks like, a beginning video for it, and also maintaining that loose leash walking.
Hey guys, it's Kate from Leader Dogs for the Blind, DDMI. Obviously you know all that already. And Eric's behind the camera.
Doing a horrible job right now.
Maybe, yes. And this is Deacon here, back with us to show you some tips and tricks for walking on a leash. Some people had some good questions about it, so the next few videos are just going to give you some tips about how to maybe improve your leash walking skills with your dog. This is something that's going to be really hard. It's going to take a lot of practice. And it's not going to happen overnight, obviously. It's a really hard skill for the dog to learn and then learn with you, that's your expectation. And we've also been teaching them to guide for the last few months, so we're teaching them to kind of pull us down the sidewalk, so they have that motivation to get down the sidewalk as well. So it's best to start out in a quieter area and not just walking straight down the sidewalk. So we're starting out in the parking lot here. You can start out in a driveway or a small section of sidewalk out in the street, only if you don't have a busy street. Obviously, you don't want everybody getting hit by a car. So this short clip is just going to talk about how to work on changing directions and keeping your dog guessing and rewarding your dog for coming with you, basically. So I'm going to give you a little demo here, and I'll kind of explain what I'm doing, and Eric will help give an explanation as well, too. All right, Deacon. Whoop.
I'm doing a very bad job at camera work right now. Sorry, I'm used to being in the spotlight.
Good job. When he does come with you, when you say heel, you can also give him a food reward at that point, using those clean handling skills that we talked about earlier. Deacon, heel. Good talk to him. Heel. Good boy. Good boy. Deacon, heel. Good boy. Very good. Good job. Deacon, heel. Good boy. Always using your voice to kind of try to keep him engaged. Good boy. Good job. Good.
Notice how every time Kate's about to change direction, she's using Deacon's name and then the command heel. And that's just to give Deacon a heads up that we are about to change directions and I need you to come with me, buddy.
Good boy. You can change your pace as well. Good boy. Very good. Nice. Good job. Good heel. Good job, buddy. Good boy. Good. Heel. Very good.
And Deacon's actually pretty focused and he's engaged right now and he's doing a great job of keeping pace with Kate. Not all dogs are going to respond like this on the very first session, obviously, so you may not be able to go for as longer stretches and you might need to change direction more frequently and reward more frequently, and that is completely all right. It's just kind of reminding them what the rules of the game are, and in this case the rules are you stick with me, you come with me, and you're going to get good things just like this. So, Kate, he's being really good right now, but what would you do, say, if he was yanking at the end of the leash? Say he's trying to fly down the parking lot and head all the way down there to the mailboxes. What would you do?
So I would keep it in a really small box in that instance. So imagine a small box, maybe 6 by 6 on the ground, and just be doing turns within that small area, as opposed to trying to go pretty far or go any kind of distance.
Okay, and what if Deacon lunges to the end of the leash there? What would you do?
I would just pause and use the leash to guide him back into the heel position. They're really good at responding to that collar pressure, so if you just put a little pressure backwards, they're going to do a good job of getting back into that nice heel position for you.
Cool, very nice.
All right. My voice to really try to keep him engaged from not sniffing or picking up the sticks. There's a lot of stuff that he could have picked up right here. So this is just one Deacon. Good. So I just use his name to get his attention back on me, and then I'm going to give him a food reward for responding.
Excellent.
We call that name recognition. All right, guys. That's one trick you can use to work on your loose leash.
So something noteworthy in that last video there, I know the dog's not pulling hard, but the dog reaches the end of its leash multiple times. And you'll see that's actually one of our puppy coordinators, VJ. And you'll see that she is still able to maintain a loose leash while walking that dog. So she says yes while the leash is loose. And even though the dog then gets to the end of the leash and kind of pulls a little bit, you'll see she just pauses. And then where did her reinforcement go? It came right back to her left-hand side. So she kept the leash, nice and slinky and loose, sorry, rather than playing like slinky game and pulling the dog back. Just bring the food reward back to proper heel position. And then you'll see when she turned, all the way around on the corner, the dog had started figuring out, oh yeah, it's probably better if I just stay here. The rewards come faster and I don't get any collar pressure.
And that's a great point, Dana. I did want to point out a couple of things. So in the first video and subsequent videos as well, something that we haven't discussed is using a marker word before giving a reward. So in all of these videos, for the most part, they're saying yes and then giving the reward. Science has shown that dogs, you're going to be able to say the word yes faster than you'll be able to deliver a treat. So using yes as the marker word to say, yes, you did that correctly, and then follow it with the reinforcement or the treat is going to teach the dog that when you say yes, they know the good thing is coming. They know exactly at that moment what they were doing was correct. So think about that going forward as well. In addition, Dana did touch on also the pulling. VJ did a great job of not letting the dog progress and continue to pull. So when the dog started to pull, she stopped, she waited. The dog came back to the left side and delivered that treat right at the left, did not reach forward to deliver the treat to the dog, but asked the dog to come back to her. So that's going to help. I know pulling is frequently an issue with our is I guess a question or something that our host homes need to work on or have concerns and want to work on. And of course, if during any of this you have questions or concerns after starting into some of these techniques and need some further guidance, as always, reach out to your breeding team and we'll be happy to give you that further guidance or put you in touch with the folks that can. But otherwise, some really great videos here on loose leash walking. Obviously, the goal is to be always frequently reinforcing the dog for the correct behavior in the correct heel position. So distractions is what we're going to talk about next. Managing distractions. So this is often going hand in hand with other behaviors or cues that you're working on. Remember we talked about the 3 Ds of difficulty are going to be distractions is one of them, in addition to distance and duration. So they can come in many forms, and again, it's going to depend dog to dog and situation to situation. Sometimes it's a bird, sometimes it's a squirrel, sometimes it's one or the other or both. Sometimes it's kids walking by, kids running by, bicycles, traffic. Sometimes it's a smell that they're experiencing. So it could be something that they hear, something that they see, something that they smell, something that they're feeling. Some dogs, if they're itchy, under their collar, that's distracting enough for them to not perform a behavior. So be really thinking about what is distracting to your dog in each situation. And maybe a squirrel distracts them when they're out on a walk, but it's not distracting them when they're in the yard. So really be cognizant of what context each of these things is happening. And it's best to always be prepared for distractions. So always having something that is higher value than that distraction. And maybe that's a really good toy, or really good treat. Maybe that's a really good, a praise that the dog responds to really, really well. Sometimes praise is just as good as a good treat, depending on the dog. So we do have a couple of videos here for the progression of managing distractions, specifically during walking. Again, I know this is typically a reoccurring issue for our breeding stock homes, so that's why we're addressing it so specifically.
Hey guys, it's Kate with Deacon and some drool.
Eric behind the camera doing terrible camera job, but
Yeah. So we're ready to kind of go for a walk down this stretch of sidewalk here, and I'm going to use obedience to try to refocus him if he's pulling me too fast down the sidewalk, and maybe some other things if it comes up. So Deacon,
I'm gonna try and not fall as I walk down the shoulder of the road.
Boy, good job. You can talk to them. Good boy. Good job. Yeah. Deacon. Good boy. Yeah. Good boy. Yeah. Deacon. Sit. Good boy. Down. Good boy. Very good. Deacon, heel. Good job, buddy. Good boy. Very good.
He faked me out right there.
I'm elusive. So I'm kind of using collar pressure to stop him, and then doing the obedience commands. You guys can hear me okay.
Yep.
Good boy. You're good.
There's a giant cat in the yard right to your left there.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even see that.
Deacon didn't either, thankfully.
Deacon. Deacon, heel. Good boy. Good job. Deacon, heel. Good boy. What a good boy.
We have little Miss Uma with us here, and we were going to do some short demos here. We have some requests about what to do when your dog is sniffing when you're out on a walk. So we're going to show you some techniques of things you can practice with the dog.
Yeah, we had questions too about if it's okay if your dog sniffs, and you know, we would prefer if they didn't. We know that they're still dogs at the end of the day, and that you guys are being very willing to take them home and get them exercise and stuff. So sniffing is going to happen. It's just how do you deal with it when it does. So we're going to show you some techniques with that for that.
So just a reminder, remember these videos were made for the dogs that are actively in training still and just out on rehome. So sniffy walks are okay, but if a dog is really pulling towards scent, these tools and tips will still be very helpful.
All right, and I'll kind of narrate along the way, hopefully. Okay, we're going to go for a walk. Uma's doing a nice job of walking next to Eric, nice and relaxed. So she sniffs. So all Eric's going to do is turn around and take, 8 to 10 steps back. Pause for a little bit, disengage with Uma. Don't look at her, don't give her any attention. And then use her name and say heel again, and they're just going to start walking. Hopefully they will now make it past the spot where she was just sniffing. And now he's going to reward her for that. Awesome. He's going to show us that technique one more time. She's sniffing, taking 10 steps back, pausing, not giving her any engagement. The lack of engagement is actually what's going to cause the change in behavior for the dog right now. So they're used to getting attention from you, and now they're not getting anything. So they're like, what's going on? And now Eric's going to choose to walk past that spot again. And she walked past that spot and over a stick that was on the sidewalk and is engaging with Eric. Okay, now he's just going to show us how to use her name to get her attention back on him. So that didn't work, so he's going to go ahead and back up again. Again, not paying any attention to her. She's kind of like, what is going on? Looking back up at him, wondering what he wants. You can also engage the dog along the way. You can talk to them. You can kind of try to keep them interested in you as opposed to the environment. The environment's going to be very, very interesting to them, obviously, because there's lots of smells. Look, Eric just used her name to get her attention back on him. And he's just practicing name recognition along the way, saying her name, getting her to look back up at him, and rewarding her for that. Good. So he's also treating in the correct position, like we talked about earlier in the reinforcing videos. Good. So this can be a lot easier with one dog as opposed to two. So all these tasks might be a little bit harder if you're walking more than one dog at the same time. So if you have the ability to do it one dog at a time, it'll be a lot easier to have control over your environment and what's going on. Good. You can see a little dog ahead. Eric's going to use her name to keep his attention and just engage with her. Keep her attention on him. Also, though, if you get yourself in a situation that's like, you're like, what the heck, I don't know what to do, there's a couple things you can do. You can use a treat to lure the dog out of the situation. Eric, how would you want to show us that?
Yeah, we're just working on some dog distraction up ahead here.
Yeah, do you want to show us how you would lure her away from a situation that she's really focused on?
Come on.
Good. And you just get her out of the situation. So you can just stick that treat right in front of their face and lure them away. That's kind of like the emergency escape plan, right? Just put that treat right in front of their face and then take them in the direction you want to go, basically.
If they're super fixated and they're wanting to go down the sidewalk, especially maybe there's somebody else walking their dog way down the sidewalk and the dog's wanting to go, you can always stop too and Uno, sit. Good girl, down. Very nice. And you can do a little obedience to kind of rein them in there.
Yep, all those things that we talked about in the videos before.
Yeah, good job.
Also, if you're going to get yourself in this situation that you're not comfortable with or you're not sure how to deal with, you can just change direction again. Get abort, basically. See, my foot noise startled her a little bit there, but she recovered right away, and Eric praised her for recovering.
Good girl. Well done. So I can actually see her looking down at the object on the ground, and then she's checking back in with me. So since we've been kind of reinforcing the good behavior of, pay attention to me, good things happen, she's choosing that behavior over sniffing or picking something up.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Hopefully this helps with your walks a little bit, and we'll continue to give you more tips and tricks for walking. It's one of those things that's really hard to get down, and we appreciate you guys being willing to work on it.
Thanks, guys.
So again, there's some great videos showing how to work through some distractions while walking and while performing loose leash walking. So using the dog's obedience skills and your engagement with the dog to manage those distractions. That's our overall goal here. And again, you have to be more exciting than whatever is going on to distract them. So stopping and not allowing them to continue to engage with whatever distraction is getting their attention, and also being more exciting and more rewarding than that object. And sometimes, like you saw in the video, that might look like calling their name for them to turn around and engage with you, and then, oh my gosh, good job, and giving them a treat and rewarding them for discontinuing that stare towards the distraction or the otherwise being distracted.
So one of the things that we received information from our hosts saying that they wanted a little bit more information on was relaxation protocol. And so what is relaxation protocol? And the purpose of relaxation protocol is to give your dogs the skills necessary to settle anytime, no matter what environment or what's happening around them. So it's a little different from your mat or station behavior, which your mat behavior is happening because you've placed something down, you've told the dog to stay on it, you want them to be there until you release them. Relaxation protocol kind of just reins in your dog and gives them the ability to turn off in a variety of environments. And obviously, you don't start this relaxation protocol out in the middle of a dog park somewhere with dogs running around. This starts in your home in a controlled environment with minimal distractions. Again, building on this is one where you're actually going to stay near your dog throughout, but duration is something you're going to increase, as well as the length of time that you're able to do this with your dog. So training is going to start in your home. There's a 15-day program. I've sent out information before to our host families, and I'll certainly provide it again in links. I've included an actual description of the relaxation protocol. Everything that's written in this PowerPoint today has been provided as well. There's going to be a very short video after I'm done talking about relaxation protocol with some links and everything, so you guys have this information at your disposal. We're here for you. If you want to learn more, we are willing to share the information. So some things to think about with this with relaxation protocol. It's different from obedience training. The goal here is relaxation, not compliance with your sit or your down. And most importantly, you don't want to be progressing to the next task set, which follows along in this 15-day program until your dog's able to actually complete the step before. So you're going to go at your dog's pace. Some dogs are much quicker to catch on that laying down and relaxing is a easy way to get rewards and get treats. Some dogs, it takes them a little bit more time to learn that there's an off switch. So some supplies that you'll need for the relaxation protocol, you're going to want small treats because you're going to be feeding about 45 to 50 small rewards during the course of a relaxation protocol. It's about, it varies in time. You can do a 5-minute relaxation protocol. You can work up to doing a 10-minute relaxation protocol. It kind of all just depends on the dog. The goal is to keep it short enough that the dog relaxes and is then able to function and pay better attention to you. Maybe then you work on obedience training, etc. So because you're going to be using so many treats, it's going to be really important that these are your low calorie treats. Charlie Bears are a preferred item. If you have to use their actual kibble, make sure you're taking it out of a portion of their meal. This goes for the training throughout all of this. If you're actually using any of their kibble, make sure that you're subtracting it out of whatever it is that you would normally feed them at a meal to make sure that the dogs maintain a good weight. You can designate a relaxation mat. It's not necessary. You can use the same station mat for your other training if you'd like. The raised platforms, a lot of our puppies, this is all geared around our future leader dogs, but our puppies tend to do better on a raised platform. They get a little less antsy about getting up and going somewhere else. For some reason, they like being up on something. So again, the goal here is that the dog is going to be likely next to you in heel position. Again, if you make heel position the place that pays, that's where your dog is going to want to spend the most of the time. It's important that you remain very calm and quiet throughout the whole session. You're not cueing your dog to sit or down if it's doing something, if it gets up in the middle of it, because that happens. You simply wait them out, wait till they resit, wait till they lay back down, then, give them a reinforcement. You can re-cue if you absolutely have to, if your dog, just needs, hey, I need to know that I need to sit again. It's okay. But remember, the more breaks that you have to take in the relaxation protocol, the more you really shouldn't be moving on to the next step. Make sure you stay where you are before progressing on or making things more difficult. So the way that you can make the relaxation protocol more difficult is by starting to add in your own bodily movements. You're moving your right leg, your left leg, waving your hands, etc. So you're going to just want to keep at the step that you're at until you know that your dog is able to maintain the position in a relaxed way. So I'm going to play a video now. This is just a quick video done by another organization, but it was a nice short clip that kind of showed how to work on relaxation protocol. And again, we can provide you the step-by-step 15-day protocol and give you all of the tools and resources that you need. But this is just a nice visual to learn with.
Hi, I'm Joan Harris. And this is my dog, Brett. And we're going to be taking things down a notch and talking about relaxation protocol. Everybody wants to have a dog that knows how to relax in the house. Dogs need to relax while you're watching the TV, while you're cooking dinner, while you have company over. So relaxation protocol is a great way to teach your dog to do this. You're teaching your dog on cue to go to his place and relax. Relaxation protocol is a really easy exercise to teach. Start out by picking a handful of your dog's favorite treats. Long-lasting Merrick lamb ones work great because they take a while to chew. And I'm going to stick them right in front of his nose, and I'm just going to lure him onto a bed. And if he nose down, I can lure him into down. Otherwise, I can just start dropping the treats in between his front feet. And what I want him to start to do is just realize he has to stay there and relax. So I want to start spreading the treats out and saying, how long can I wait without giving him a treat before he pops off the bed? Start to teach him treats only come when he's relaxed and on the bed. Signs you want to look for is if the dog is over on a hip, or if he puts his head down. Those are all reasons you could drop a treat. Your goal, after doing this many times, is to be able to get up, start to walk around the room. I usually replace this with a long-lasting chew toy at that point. See? Maybe walking away. Make sure that all of your reinforcers are delivered by you going back to the bed. When you're done with the exercise, always release your dog with whatever cue you're using, so he knows it's okay to get up. Once you've mastered relaxation protocol, both you and your dog can enjoy some relaxation.
So, that provided a quick overview. Again, we have a step-by-step protocol that you can follow. It includes saying, you wait for have your dog hold position for 3 seconds, then you treat your dog. You have your dog hold for 5 seconds, then you treat your dog. It just gives you something to follow along in a step-by-step process, which is really nice. So we'll make sure we share that with you guys as well. So now we'll talk a little bit about some of the problem behaviors. Again, we had sent out a survey to our host families, kind of asking what are things that you want to know from us, and the obedience side of everything is kind of what we've covered now. And then we've chosen a few of the problem type behaviors with the dogs in the homes. The first that we're going to cover is do dogs meeting people when they come to your house. So greeting company, and what does that look like? So one of the greeting company videos is where the GDMIs are actually working with the dog on leash. And that's something that we would highly encourage. If you have a dog that gets overly excited when guests come over, have them on a leash. Wait for that moment when they're calm and they've stopped lunging or barking or jumping. The dog in this video is amazing, and you'll see, I mean, she barely even makes a move for the person knocking at the door. So we know that is an ideal situation, but if your dog runs to the front door and is jumping and you just can't get them under control, really utilize the tools you have. Make sure you have treats in your pocket so that you're always ready for these training opportunities that arise. And especially if you know that you have people coming over, be prepared. Have the dog on leash. Ask the people not to knock. Even things like that, can escalate a dog to a lot of unnecessary excitement. But at the same time, once they do get excited, if you have them on leash, they can't do the bad behaviors. They may be pulling. You're just going to stand there like a statue until they kind of just stop for a second. You're going to say yes, and you're going to reward them. They're going to be like, wait a second, what just happened? Like I was pulling, and now I stopped pulling, and now you're like engaging with me again. You're not telling them no, you're not correcting them, you're not making them sit, you're not holding them down. You're literally waiting out for that good behavior. Which is the whole crux of our training program, is based on rewarding the good behaviors. So the first video that I'll play, shows a little bit about that. The second one is utilizing the mat behavior, which is really nice. So let me cue those up.
Hi guys, it's Eric from Leader Dog.
And Kate from Leader Dog, DDMI. And go out here.
We're here with Uma, and today we're going to talk about what to do with your dog when people come to visit. And so now we're going to start with Uma on leash here, but we figured this would be a nice topic to cover since nowadays we're having a lot of things delivered to our houses. This practice also works when you're talking to people at a distance. So right now, as we're practicing social distancing, these are some good techniques for you to use, at least the first portion of this video. So I'm going to start with Uma on leash here, and we're going to have Kate, who's already positioned outside the door. She's going to knock a couple times, and we're going to practice rewarding Uma for good behavior, not barking or vocalizing, not running towards the door to see what's going on, okay? All right, Uma. Yep. Very nice. Good girl. All right, Kate. Good girl. Very nice. So now Uma's staying right here at my side. So I'm just going to reward her for good stationary behavior. Good. And now Kate's kind of increased the knocking a little bit there, so we're upping the difficulty just a little bit, but not too much. Very nice. Good girl. All right, you can knock a little harder, Kate. Good girl. Very nice. So again, she's holding that position right there next to me. Good girl. All right, one more time. Nice big knock. She's definitely a little confused, but she's doing a great job. All right, excellent. So now next we're going to have Kate actually enter into the in through the door here and stay at a distance, and I'm going to work on just keeping Uma in a nice and controlled here, okay? All right, Kate, come on in.
Hi.
And now this is a little unfair because Uma knows Kate and she really likes Kate, so, but she's doing a great job. She looked over at Kate. I'm going to go ahead and switch over here just so you guys can see her a little better probably. Sit. Good girl. All right, Kate, come on in.
Oh, what a cute dog.
Very nice. So we're going to go ahead and reset the exercise just because she got up and approached Kate here.
So you just had her be repositioned.
Yep. I just gave her a little leash pressure backward. She sat already, so she knows that she messed up there. So we're going to go ahead and we'll reset the exercise, the same difficulty. All right, come on in, Kate.
Oh, what a cute dog.
Good girl. And there we go. Now I see her actually.
Can I pet your dog?
Good girl.
Can I pet your dog?
No, absolutely not.
Will she bite me?
Are you 6 feet away at least?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Thank you. Good job. Very nice.
Where's her mask?
So there's a few tricks that you can use with a dog on leash.
So that's a really cute video, and obviously Uma is a really well-trained dog. But, definitely something to aspire to. Hopefully you were able to see, Eric's reinforcing every time that Uma made the right choice and didn't take a step forward and just, maybe wiggled her tail or wiggled her butt or went from a sit to a stand. That's okay. She didn't make any forward progress. Eric reinforced her. So those are just small increments that you can reinforce the dog for. And then in the second video here, they're utilizing the mat behavior.
All right, guys. So here in the second part of the exercise, again, we're going to use that mat behavior, and you can already see we've done a little work here with Uma, so she knows where she's supposed to be. So I'm just going to go ahead and reinforce that behavior because
Our doors stick sometimes.
Right. This nice stationary behavior is something that we want to reward because, again, it's what we're going to use in this next portion of the exercise. So it'd probably be best to start with the dog on leash just in case the dog does fail the exercise, like before we showed where Uma kind of made a movement towards Kate, I was able to use the leash and put her back into position. So we want to get some success there before maybe trying with the mat here. All right, Kate, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to repeat the same steps. We're going to have Kate knock, then we're going to have Kate knock and talk to the door, and then we'll eventually have her come in. And I'm just going to reward Uma for doing a good job, and hopefully we're not going to have to do too much narration in between. All right, Kate, let's go ahead.
Hi. Oh, what a cute dog you have. Come on, go out the door, dog. Come on, dog.
Good girl. So again, we're just rewarding for that stationary behavior. We're using the positive association with the mat as
Come here. You're so cute. Can I pet your dog?
a tool to redirect the dog from making a poor decision. So.
Yeah. And even if you don't have people coming over to your house, you can still set this up with family members and practice it just for another exercise to practice and kind of use their brain and keep them engaged with you as well. So.
All right.
First of all, these two are so cute. These videos, I absolutely love them. But like Kate mentioned, and at the very end of that video, utilize other people or in your family, for some of this training. If you don't have people coming over, sometimes a familiar person is easier for the dog to work with, less distracting. But practicing the same behavior with somebody familiar that maybe they won't get overly excited for will only solidify that behavior. Then when somebody that is a little bit more exciting comes over, they have already established that mat behavior or that proper greeting behavior on leash.
So next we have counter surfing. So getting things off the counter. First of all, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So, following through with picking up, keeping everything off the counter that is tantalizing to your dog. So keeping the loaf of bread away from the edge of the counter, things that they're either out of their reach, they're up in cupboards. That's going to be the first step here to success. In the beginning, it's probably gating off your kitchen and using tie downs or the crate, while you're serving food. If you're having a party and have guests over and have food on the counters and you know that your dog does this, those are going to be your first line of defense to preventing the dog from continuing to reinforce themselves on their own. We want to make it so that it's more reinforcing for them to be off the counter than on the counter. So you're going to start by teaching the dog to ignore food on the floor also. We'll have we have a video here that's going to show the really good progression of how to teach that and then going into the food being up on the counter. And you can also utilize a leash to prevent the dog from ever getting that delicious food that's in front of them on the floor as you're starting to teach them.
Solving counter surfing. If you're unfamiliar with the term counter surfing, it's what my puppy's doing in this video. He's jumping up and he's eating food off the table. I have not yet trained him to leave food on the table. So as a first step, I'm going to teach him a default leave it from food on a plate. What I am doing is letting him choose on his own to turn away from the food, and that decision is what I'm going to click. So he can pull all he wants, but he's not going to get the food. The only thing that earns food is when he turns away from the food. Try this exercise with different types of food on the plate. Now that we're having success with that, I'm going to add the table into the picture. Because my puppy is still on leash, I can prevent him from lunging and grabbing a treat if he wants to get it. Now the concept is to never get food on the table, so adding a cue like leave it is a really bad idea because the dog might think that if you're not in the room and you're not saying the word leave it when they look at the food, then they can eat the food. However, down the line, after you've already done this training and you're sitting in the living room and your dog starts staring at something on the table, you can remind them by using the cue, leave it. Because Tug was doing so well, I'm going to make the criteria harder. It's not just an apple core and some chicken on the table now, it's hot dogs, which he loves. I like to have the food hang off the edge of the table, especially for short dogs and tall counters, so they can actually see the concept that because it's on the table, you can't have it. Here, Tug is literally inches from the hot dogs. The reason you don't want to say no or when the dog goes for the food is they can learn that they still want the food, but it's your presence that is preventing them from getting to it. By clicking and reinforcing the dog for choosing on their own not to go for the food, you're building that behavior in the dog as a natural behavior, rather than you being in the room suppresses them from doing what they want to do. This exercise is all about proofing. So you need to proof with different kinds of foods, on different surfaces, different counters, different parts of the counter, to really generalize in the dog's head that any food on that counter is not a good idea to get it. Here you can see footage of my puppy just sniffing around in the living room after the exercise is over and not thinking to go and grab at that hot dog.
Good boy. You're so smart.
Here are some tips. 1. Make sure the dog never gets the food. It sounds obvious, but some dogs are very fast. 2. If he is struggling to look away from the food, either give him a hint by making an attention noise or taking some steps away so he's not as close to the food. 3. As he succeeds, raise criteria. 4. You can start off first with a carrot on the table, but the reinforcer is something even better, like chicken. 5. Watch my Leave It video for more information on teaching the Leave It.
All right, so that's a really good video, and she touched on a couple of very important facts. Not using Leave It for counter surfing, because like she said, now the dog is only going to understand that if you tell them to leave it, they can't have it, or that your presence in the room means that they can't have it. Oftentimes this is happening when we're in another room, the dog is in the kitchen getting up on the counter. So we really want to make sure it's not about a leave it command, that it's just about teaching the dog that that is not an option, and that it's much better and more rewarding to keep all 4 feet on the ground. So please remember, take your time with this. Do not rush it. Do not, the video was just a 3-minute video. It progressed very quickly. Don't expect all of that progression in one day or one training session with your dog. Take it very, very slow. Keep it very, very positive. Especially with our Labradors, they are very quick. They love food. So something that you can do to help ensure that they can't reward themselves by getting the food that is not allowed. Use some type of Tupperware, maybe with some holes in it. Might not even need holes in it, but something that can protect the food so that they cannot eat it by grabbing it. We don't want to make this a whose reaction time is faster game. We just want to make it a successful game. So maybe it's starting with a hot dog, starting with just a cracker in a Tupperware container where it's interesting enough, but the dog can't reward themselves, and we don't have to worry about you snatching them away before they can get to the food. And then progressing, that's something that I found useful, is again just using some type of Tupperware or maybe an upside down plate or something to prevent the dog from physically being able to eat that food. So you saw the progression there, slow but steady, and the goal is that the dog is not going to jump up to sniff the counter or take things off the counter, because it's more rewarding to stay off the counter. But again, in the very first place, just keep as much stuff off your counter as possible, because we really want these dogs to be successful. The last thing we're going to talk about here is eating inappropriate items or picking up things that the dog is not supposed to. So to start, again, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure here. Really making sure that shoes are picked up, that kids' toys are picked up, things that aren't appropriate for a dog to chew on are out of their reach. That is going to be not only a safety and a health, hazard to potentially eat something that they're not supposed to, but also it's annoying. We don't want our shoes chewed up. We don't want the baby's toys chewed up. So really being diligent about picking up after everything so that the dog doesn't even have the opportunity to have to make the right or the wrong choice. We want to only allow them to make the right choices. So then going into, they've gotten something that they're not supposed to, or they pick something up and they're carrying it away, or they're looking at something that they're not supposed to, we want to get into a leave it command. So we'll watch that video here in just a moment, but I also want to address that if your dog eats something, it's completely down the hatch, they've ingested it, and it's not, they weren't supposed to have it. Regardless of what it is, please make sure that you're reaching out to the veterinarians for consultation on whether or not it's poisonous, toxic, could potentially cause a foreign body obstruction in their gastrointestinal system. Don't question it. Don't go to Facebook. Just make sure you call the vets directly. We would rather that it be no big deal than it be a big deal and have waited to contact the veterinarians. They're going to give you the best instruction on how to move forward and what you need to do as far as getting treatment for that dog immediately. But we'll go into watching this Leave It video. It is longer, so we're going to cut it off a little early. But we will send out the links again to all of these videos. We'll have an attachment so that they're easy to view. But it is longer, but it's got some great information in here.
Step 1. Put extremely low-value food down on the ground. Move far enough away that your dog can easily look away from the food and back at you. Mark and feed your dog for choosing to look away from the food. The first step is putting a plate of low-value food down on the ground out of reach. I suggest 10 to 15 feet away from your dog at first. It's easier if you have a helper to hold your dog's leash as you put the food down, or you could put your dog in another room. Now, hopefully he'll notice it on the floor like that, and anytime that he looks away from the distraction and looks back at me, I'm going to click him. So actually he's doing really good, so we're going to get a little bit closer to the distraction. He's not looking at it. There we go. Good job. Wishy, go jump up. Wish doesn't like that there's a fly in the room. Wish, go jump up. Good job. Good. If your dog doesn't think to look away from the food on his own, you can use an attention noise. If he still can't look away from it, it means the distraction is too hard. If this happens, use a lower value distraction or create distance from the distraction. Good boy. To set your training up for success, use low value food as the distraction at first and high value food as the reinforcer. This will make it easy for the dog to choose to look away. Good boy. When your dog looks away from the distraction, you can mark and reinforce multiple times. This will make it less likely for the dog to feel like he needs to keep looking at the distraction and will make it easier to add duration to the leave it cue. Step 2, change things up. Move the location of the distraction, use a different distraction, and approach and pass it from different angles. Good boy. Awesome. Good boy. Step 3, add the cue. Once your dog is looking away from the distraction within 3 seconds, you can add your cue. Move the distraction or change your location to get your dog to notice the distraction again. Then say your cue, leave it, mark and reinforce your dog for turning back toward you. If your dog doesn't look away from the distraction, stop saying your cue until the behavior is reliably happening within 3 seconds. This will help create a cue that the dog responds to promptly after you say it. Leave it. Awesome. Leave it. Good boy. Good boy. Leave it.
Good boy. Leave it. Awesome.
Step 4. Continue to generalize the behavior and add criteria. I've taken my puppy off leash, and now I've got the hot dogs in this food container. So I'm going to put that down like that, and I'm going to say, leave it. Good boy. Leave it. Pop, 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 pop. Awesome. So say he kept sniffing the container, I could show him the treat and lure him away like that. If the dog goes for the distraction more than 3 times in a row, it means the criteria is too high and the training will not be as effective as if you break up the steps into smaller approximations, such as working from further away or using an easier distraction. When the dog is off leash for the first time, go back to using the easiest distraction. Leave it. Good job. Good boy. Ready? Good job. Good boy. Good boy. Well then, you did so good. You could allow the dog to get the distraction on a release cue, such as get it. However, if you do this, it can lead to the dog anticipating being released, as well as getting more excited during the training process because of the fast movement of going for the food. I suggest not doing this during the initial training. If you want to give the dog the distraction, pick it up and hand it to him. Good job. There you go. Here are some ideas for generalizing the behavior. Turn away from the distraction and come back to you. Walk past the distraction with you. Walk around the distraction with you. And call your dog past the distraction to you. If you're going to be using this cue in the future at a distance from your dog, I suggest practicing using a soft voice as well as a loud voice with your dog. But I don't suggest being too loud right to begin with. First get the behavior reliable and then start to increase the volume that you use the leave it cue. Most human beings naturally want to say things that mean don't do that in an intimidating tone of voice, such as leave it or leave it, like that. However, if you want to build the leave it cue to have a conditioned positive emotional response in the animal, if you're using a cue like that that sounds intimidating to the animal, what can happen is that it's harder to build that positive emotional response than if you use a neutral tone of voice, such as leave it or something like that. So I personally like to condition the leave it cue to be conditioned with positive reinforcement so that I can then use the cue for dogs such as dogs that are fearful of people or reactive to people. And then when you're cueing them leave it in a certain scenario, they're not associating seeing that person with being intimidated and punished and then start to have a negative emotional response to the person or the other dog.
So again, that video does go into much greater detail, but a couple of things I wanted to point out. You can see where teaching the leave it is similar, but a little bit different than the counter surfing. In addition to that, instead of using a marker word yes, in these 2 videos, she's using a clicker. That's certainly something that you could utilize. And if you have questions about that, again, our team is happy to help you with that, but you could just as easily use yes and replace that clicker that she's utilizing. Again, it's very important to keep it as a positive teaching moment. So I liked at the end where she addressed keeping the tone of leave it as positive. We don't want to make this a punishment thing for the dog or something that's not good. We want to reinforce them continuing to do this and wanting to do it. So by making it a positive experience for them, it will continue to make them want to do it. So the goal here is to have the dog drop any item or ignore any item when cued. Once the dog understands the leave it command really, really, really well, and again, this is going to take a lot of time and it's going to take a lot of repetition. Once the dog is understanding it really well, this can also be utilized for things like eating some other animal poop out on a walk, or, you know, a ball goes chasing by or flying by from a soccer ball or whatever with kids playing. You know, we can really utilize this leave it command and for other scenarios. And then last but not least, we will head into a Q&A session regarding these training techniques that we talked about, and we will go from there. Thank you.